You guys remember that episode in Bebop where Spike had to kill Wen? You know, the immortal 62-year-old murderer pretending to be a child? With a body of a 12-year-old, but a mind of an old man, his judgment was cast as an adult. So, he was killed as an adult. A mentally 44-year-old man tried to have sex with a 10-year-old. Mushoku Tensei is about an ugly bastard being reincarnated as an infant in a fantasy world, with all of his mind and soul still being intact. Before I get into the meat of it, let's talk about the main character first. This guy. No, not him. Him.
I'm Sam Pound, I'm number 1.
So we got ourselves a character with a typical isekai character trait. Watching anime as their personality. Get it, viewer? He's just like you! He's a jobless loser who loves to beat his meat to naked drawings. So much so that he missed his mother's funeral because of it. This fact is for you, Mom! This dude was also a leech who was relying on his parents as his only source of income. Sorry, Dad. I know you needed money to afford your leg surgery, but I just had to use your debit card to prove to the Canadians that Americans donate more money to Maury Calliope. But honestly, I'm fine with the origins of this character, as long as they address those flaws and develop him. Welcome to the NHK had a similar premise, and I love the emotional journey that Sato went through. So what's the problem with Mushoku Tensei? This situation is weird, dude. A 34-year-old man is now an infant and is fetishizing to get breastfed by his new 25-year-old mother. And you think this is just a one-off. 35-year-old man steals the panties of his young maid. 38-year-old man is ecstatic that his teacher looks like a middle schooler and loves looking under her skirt. 41-year-old man explicitly stated that he wanted to groom a 7-year-old to be his perfect wife. 44-year-old refers to a 10-year-old girl he is about to bang as a tsundere lolly.
Stop!
The show paints this dude's obsession as a fun little joke to poke at. A slap on the wrist and he goes back to being himself. Every damn 5 minutes, it's like, I appreciate your guidance, Sensei. By the way, can I lick your feet? The show makes his character trait go unpunished, and even accepted to the point that it makes me think the author believes this is alright behavior. He's trying to redeem himself, but he didn't change this trait in the course of the story. A tsundere punch didn't work. They should have tried 5 years of therapy or 30 years of jail time. I want to talk about 2 other animes, Goblin Slayer and Red Pill Hero, both of which share similar problems with Mushoku Tensei, but actually have an answer to their issue. So, how about that first episode of Goblin Slayer? Yeah, Goblin Slayer had 2 scenes where, let's say, women got taken advantage of. I don't mind it when a story has these themes, but they have to portray it for what it is. Cold, evil, and horrific. Goblin Slayer unfortunately portrays its scenes with a little too much sex appeal, which leaves an awful taste in my mouth. However, I so enjoyed Goblin Slayer as a whole for 2 reasons. One, despite the titillation, the evildoers that committed these moral crimes are not seen in light gesture and go punished. 2, at least in the anime, there is only one time where the act does happen, and one where it almost did. Each of them lasted around a minute, and the rest of the show continued. They didn't need to shove these questionable titillation scenes every 5 minutes. Alright, so now Red Pilled Hero. Now 4chan over here collects questionably underage girls like a rich kid collecting Pokemon cards. But the show never had that moral dilemma because the main character doesn't come onto these girls, and in fact daughter zones them. Don't get me wrong, this still makes for pretty repetitive and bland character dynamics, but at least I'm not cringing at the fact that now 4chan wanted to bang his less than a month old pet or something. Warping it back to Mushoku Tensei, I'm not saying that the problems of the other two anime are negligible, as they do end up souring my experience. The difference being is that their issues were more in the background, thus easier to ignore, or at least somewhat confronted. And it's in these two failures where Mushoku Tensei became a detriment to my entertainment of the actual show. Before I made this video, I was looking around for what were people's counter-arguments. One of them is that Rude eventually gets punished in the manga, but those reasons seem to be more about him picking up too many girls, rather than the bigger issue I have been stating. Another I hear is that age was seen differently in medieval times. There was also no fucking hairspray during that time either, so what the hell is realism? When making a media fantasy, you get to include and leave out parts of the inspiration source. If you include something like every young adult being beautiful, then there's an underlying reason that you want it in the story. So I ask, why does someone want to add grooming 7-year-olds? To say it's awful, right? Right? And the last big counter argument I heard is that it's fiction, so why worry about it? If this was a sophisticated novel, I would have brushed it off as not for me. But it's an anime with the appeal of being a fantasy adventure. I watch anime to immerse myself in a show in the first place. There are a few anime out there where the author wants the viewer to separate themselves from the setting. Isekai like Mushoku Tensei is definitely not one of those. I took all of its themes head on, but some prove that they can't stand on good ground. If this was any other anime, I would have immediately dropped it and give it a cringe out of 10, not bothering to make a video about it. But that's exactly why I'm here talking about it, because there are some great things about this show. Outside of his Danny libido, Rudy does develop as a character. He chooses action over stagnation. He cares for others over being apathetic. And he tries to find a balance between life and death. The world has enough politics and history to keep a plot moving forward, like with these mannequin people or something. There are a lot of scenes that are so down to earth and intimate that it's hard not to get immersed in them. And most of all, this anime presents the desire that most people want: a second chance at life. And goddamn, do I not envy the position that Rudy has. To be able to remedy all the mistakes he made in his younger years of his life. Yeah, don't get me wrong. This show still had plenty of isekai trash and boring moments that prevented it from being an 11 out of 10 show. Even outside of Rudy being an older guy with young girls, I generally don't like perversion as a personality trait for main characters, unless there's a fun spin on it. Mushoku Tensei had the potential to be an 8 out of 10 show, but the constant amount of lighthearted sexual violations towards minors had it dropped out of my favor. The show got a 5 out of 10 for me. Oh hey, that's also the age range that Rudy tries to go